I hear a lot of talk about Florida Man and a lot of making fun of Florida in general for the behavior of Floridians who break the law. And fair enough. Fair enough. The stories are hilarious and certainly worthy of a chuckle. But I'm concerned that it will result in the kind of embarrassment that might actually cause Florida to undo some very good laws. You see, the reason, and I have harped on this since my radio days, the reason that Florida Man is a thing is not because people act crazier in Florida. Don't get me wrong. People act crazier in Florida. I say this because Ron DeSantis is governor there. But at the same time, Maxwell Frost is a district representative. There is sanity in Florida. In fact, if you follow police blotters, you will find that just like Berry Gordy discovered all these wonderful musicians in Motown and was interviewed about how he managed to find all this talent and revealed that, in fact, this talent is everywhere. He was simply looking for it. Just like that, Florida has the same crazy in terms of the criminal class as everybody else. But their reporting laws are different. Now, I would love to take my best shot at telling you about it, but I have sworn not to waste your time with a folksy attempt when there is a better expert that I can get to tell you about it. And as it happens, the best internet expert on the law, the good fellow at Legal Eagle, talked about this very thing. Let's have a listen.
Yes, Florida Man.
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 Florida Man. Mr. Florida.
Oh,
Who can forget classic Florida Man stories like Florida Man undergoing kidney dialysis is upset that he can't bring life-size cutout of President Trump for emotional support during his treatments. Florida Man threatens to kill man with kindness, uses machete named Kindness. Florida Man accused of stealing gator from golf course threw it around to teach it a lesson. For every US state, people have formed some stereotypes about the people who live there. For Oregon, people may unfairly assume it's full of Portlandia hipsters. For Texas, people might unfairly assume folks are just one unkind word away from going full Yosemite Sam.
No, that's
all
true.
you skunks, clear out of here!
But whenever you hear the name Florida Man, it conjures up a certain image of swamps, beer, and lawless shamelessness. And I'm not talking about Mar-a-Lago. But what if I told
I just want to give you an example of what I was talking about earlier. In my, going back to radio reporting days, in my radio reporting days, I did a story about a guy who stopped a home invasion with a battle axe. And incidentally, he looked just like a Viking. He had the big Viking beard. He's a Michigan man. Had the big Viking beard. Guy broke into his I think it was a house, might have been an apartment. Either way, guy broke in. He grabbed what was handy, which was, because he was a big damn nerd, just like your old pal Jake, not punching down there. He had a replica battle axe, and he used it. And the story was, the person was wounded, but not mortally. And the big question was, is this guy going to get in trouble? Is this any different than using a firearm if it's a home invasion? And obviously he didn't get in trouble and it was all fine, but it was the kind of weird thing you would expect to hear in the Florida Man case, in the Florida Man reports. And the only reason we had access to that information is in the manner that we did here in Michigan was because it wasn't the perpetrator that did the weird thing. It was the supposed victim that did the weird thing. But this stuff happens all the time. Ask if you have any cop friends, ask them for their weird stories, and oh boy, get ready to hear some wild things. And by the way, I am of the belief that the genuine nemesis of the police officer is just alcohol. It's just alcohol. When people get drunk, they act wild.
That the overwhelming daily...
It's not me speaking out. Lord. Throwing stones at glass houses. That ain't Whiskey Jake saying you shouldn't drink alcohol. Just that you should be aware that you'll be crazy when you're drunk.
Of stories about Florida and their Florida antics isn't because Floridians are inherently weird and prone to getting caught doing ridiculous things. Really, the reason we hear so much about Florida has to do with something that should be the envy of all other states: Florida's radical commitment to open meetings and accessible public records. So let's discuss the phenomenon of Florida man, Florida woman, and Florida people, and how we owe Florida's open government laws for entertaining us with stories like SWAT team rescues Florida man from tree, Florida man blames Putin in attempt to avoid speeding ticket.
Oh, sure.
And so many more tales.
All right, I'm going to jump forward, past a little bit of the nonsense. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Here's the good stuff.
You could just apply Florida man to your Google alerts. The general pattern of these stories involve headlines that are literally just Florida man followed by the absolutely bonkers thing that they are reported to have done. What kinds of things, you ask? Well, I'm so happy you asked, because these peculiar tales fall into several categories of Floridian woe. You've got your booze-related antics like...
Okay, all right. Come on. Son of a gun. Give me, he talks about, I swear to you, the reason here. And it's fascinating. All right.
Flimsy excuse to list as many Florida man and Florida woman stories as possible in one video. Yes. Now, I'm also going...
fine. That was a good joke.
Fresh meth tonight on dating profile cyberstalk. Florida woman bites camel's genitals to escape from animal after it sat on her. The camel did nothing wrong. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Devin, are you actually going to talk about some kind of pertinent legal issues here? Or is this just some flimsy excuse to list as many Florida man and Florida woman stories as possible in one video? Yes. Now, I'm also going to talk about all the crazy stuff that happens in all of the other states as well. We'll get to the law in a second. But the thing is, weird news stories exist in every state, and they're not hard to find. Texas man texts weed offer to cop, gets arrested. Arizona man selling ranch for...
Okay, these are too good not to let go. I'm going to keep letting them play, but I swear to you, he tells you the thing that is the end, that should be the envy of all their states. And I'm going to tell you that we should all be pushing to have these same rules. But let's enjoy this for a minute. Come on.
$5 million due to constant alien attacks. Pennsylvania man facing assault charges over Big Mac. Connecticut man yells at bear until it leaves his kitchen. Missouri man helps start riot against self, will almost assuredly be re-elected senator after 3 more years in office. There seems to be a disproportionate amount of weird stories coming out of Florida. But there's actually a very good reason we hear about Florida so much in these viral news stories, and it's something that Florida actually has done very well that is worthy of praise that should be modeled by other states. I'm talking about Florida's robust public records laws enshrined by statute and constitutional amendments. As reported by the Miami New Times, ironically, one of the things that may be contributing to Florida being shamed so often in the national media is something all Floridians should be proud of. Since 1909, Florida has had a proud tradition that all government business is public business and therefore should be available to the public. That means all records, including photos and videos produced by a public agency, are easily accessible with a few narrow and obvious exceptions. Public officials are also required to open all of their meetings, even unofficial ones, to the public. So here's a quick recap of Florida's century-long tradition of open records laws. Florida passed its first public records law in 1909 with the aptly named Public Records Law. As stated by the Florida Public Records Law, quote, "It is the policy of the state that all state, county, and municipal records are open for personal inspection and copying by any person, providing access to public records is a duty of each agency. Under this law, all records made or received by any public agency in the course of official business are available for inspection unless subject to a specific exception or exclusion by the Florida legislature." And in the century that law has been enacted, the definition of what constitutes a public record has expanded beyond the traditional written documents. And you know what public records are also subject to disclosure? Arrest reports, 911 calls, and mugshots with private info like address and phone numbers redacted. As a result,
to my knowledge, all of those mugshots were real. Yeah, I just want to say, think about the implications of that. Yes, okay, hilarious stories, sure. Embarrassment for the state as they become national stories for how ridiculous they are, sure. But one of the biggest pathways to corruption is secrecy. And particularly if your state is not gerrymandered. If you have districts that are drawn by a nonpartisan body, it can only benefit you. Now, I give that caveat because, yes, this can be turned into a crime wave narrative. But you should have nothing to fear from the truth. And if the state is obligated to make any piece of media that it creates available to the people who paid them to create that media, such as a mugshot, such as an arrest record, such as any business the state conducts, that can only be good in the long term. I highly, highly recommend that you pressure your representatives at the state level to adopt these laws. I mean, it's a little spoiler for the what you can do, but I will also say it's one of those things that has bipartisan support. If it doesn't have one party specifically against it, you can just assume it has bipartisan support. Our legislators are too tired. They're too exhausted by all of the nonsense that they have brought upon themselves with lie upon lie upon lie and having to take a strong stance against X, Y, and Z because it's part of a bigger national conversation, that blah, 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 blah. They're exhausted by that. So if there's something that they can campaign about, if there's something that they can make their issue that doesn't yet have a bunch of baggage associated with it, doesn't already have a pre-programmed fight that's going to come their way and a group of lobbyists that's going to yada, 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 yada. There's something like that, they're going to be delighted by it. They're going to look at that and say, my God, something my constituents want me to do that isn't already part of a massive fight? Yes, please. I'll make that my thing. Sure. So before Republicans find a way to get their fangs in this, this is a good law. And I shouldn't even be harsh on Republicans here. You know what? Republicans are not actively against this. So assume it's bipartisan. Doesn't matter who your representative is. You have an equal chance of getting them to make this an issue they'll pick up. Give it a shot. Let's hear a little more detail here.
Got access to Florida Man stories like drunk Florida man kicked out of library, told cops he was Jason Bourne. Florida man with Florida tattoo on his forehead arrested for misuse of 911, marijuana possession. Florida man suspected of smelling woman's feet at library leads police on scooter chase. And in 1967, Tuesday, Florida expanded its open records laws even further with the passage of the Government in the Sunshine Law. These provisions, commonly called the Sunshine Law, establish a basic right of access to most meetings of boards, commissions, and other governing bodies of state and local agencies and authorities. Subject to limited exemptions, the Sunshine Law dictates that no resolution, rule, or formal action taken by any governing body or board are legally binding unless their meetings comply with these requirements. Which leads to the publication of Florida Man stories like Florida Man offered to pay officer with hamburger for oral sex, police say. Florida Man tells police he's allowed to carry meth.
No word on whether or not the police took them up on the hamburger offer.
Ask the FBI. Florida man claims he was driving car with 2 missing tires because of a curse. And public officials who knowingly violate these sunshine laws are subject to a first-degree misdemeanor charge punishable by a fine of up to $1,000 and a jail term not to exceed 1 year. Now, an unintentional violation is a non-criminal fine of up to $500, and a public official who intentionally violates the public records law is subject to a suspension or removal from office. And attorney's fees and court costs are available to plaintiffs that prevail in a civil suit for access. And since 1967, Floridians have repeatedly voted to enshrine open government principles into the state constitution. Voters adopted the Sunshine Amendment in 1976, which required the full and public disclosure of the financial interests of all public officers, candidates, and employees. And in 1990, a constitutional amendment applying open meetings laws to the state legislature was overwhelmingly passed by the voters. And in 1992, voters amended the state constitution one more time to guarantee the openness in state government and expand public records laws to the judiciary. And as a result, Florida couldn't hide stories like Florida man accused of using Kool-Aid packets to steal nearly $1,000 in Walmart merchandise. Florida man arrested with pound of cocaine, some kept on stack of bacon.
My God, somebody put a medium-sized amount of cocaine on a stack of bacon.
Florida man sprays woman with roach spray, break out nunchucks over loud music. Now, and that's not to say that the laws are solely responsible for all of the crazy stories that come out of Florida. As highlighted by the New York Times in a report on the subject, some contributing factors to the Florida man phenomenon are the sheer size and diverse culture of the state. Florida is the third largest U.S. state, and with more people means more crime stories. The Times noted that drugs and the weather are also culprits.
I'm a just island boy. I'm a just island boy. Florida boy. I got a real damn tropical.
The steaminess adds to the seaminess.
Look, I consider myself somewhat an expert on the matter, coming from a state which is two peninsulas. Florida is not an island, it is a peninsula. Although now that I say that, I realize the man could be talking about being from the Florida Keys, but even then, it's an archipelago.
And outdoor living makes for easy viewing and recording. But the most important factor in Florida
Also, heat. Fun fact. The hotter it is, the higher the crime will be on a given day. Look it up. It's a wild but true thing. But when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. People are outside interacting with each other. It's cold, you're home, interacting with just your family, which is a whole different kind of crime sometimes.
Superman's superhero origin story is the strength of Florida's public records laws. As reported by a local station in Tallahassee, under the Sunshine Act, the public and the media are given access to crime reports almost immediately after they happen, like the daily booking report, which is posted almost as soon as a person is booked into jail. That information allows reporters to detail the narratives quickly. Barbara Peterson, the president of Florida's First Amendment Foundation, notes that the easy access coupled with the sheer novelty makes these stories takes off. Quote, it's fun to say Florida man, both the fact that we do get access to that information early on, but also the branding. And while Florida reporters can get these arrest reports quickly, reporters in other states typically have to file a request for an arrest record, which police can routinely deny despite their jurisdiction's purported open records laws. Arrest reports like, Florida man with drugs around penis denies they were his. Florida man arrested after hitting dad with pizza because he was mad he helped birth him. Florida man arrested for handing out marijuana because it was Christmas.
I mean, come on. I can't believe they arrested him for that. On Christmas.
In a 2019 editorial, Pennsylvania journalist Gil Smart explained the roadblocks to getting an arrest report in the Keystone State versus the Sunshine State. As Smart explained, Pennsylvania open records laws allow police to withhold information if it's considered part of a criminal investigation. And police would frequently claim that we can't give you the arrest report because it's part of the investigation. And even if police did produce documents, there was no way to know what volume of information was being upheld. But when Smart came to Florida, he was shocked by the ease with which journalists can get information. Quote, law enforcement provides you with this info as a matter of course, without complaining or throwing roadblocks in your way or claiming it's crucial info in an investigation. Just how easy was it for Smart to get these documents in Florida? Well, a local police agency started sending Smart daily arrest reports by email, something he didn't even sign up for or request before receiving them. Now, of course, the salaciousness and silliness of these tales of woe do lend themselves to a special kind of I'm so glad it's not me enjoyment. I mean, how else is one supposed to react to Florida man arrested for calling 911 after his kitten was denied entry into a strip club? It's easy to chuckle at some of these more frivolous sounding stories, but many of these headlines are deeply disturbing and violent, and critics of the Florida man phenomenon note that the punchline is often at the expense of Floridians with mental health issues and
Okay, well, if we're going to ruin the fun,
severe drug dependency. Mental health issues and drug dependency issues like, oh, well, maybe that's not in such great taste. And it's easy to forget that every Florida man or Florida woman story involves real people, and it's important not to overlook the seriousness of their alleged crimes. Even the creator of the Florida Man Twitter account has regrets about his role in popularizing the meme. For 36-year-old Freddie Campion, who was raised in the United Kingdom, Florida represented a kind of pure, undiluted Americana. Quote, "I never thought I was making fun of Florida because Florida is America. It's made up of people who moved here 5 years ago. Even when I think of Florida Man as a character, he moved to Florida after he faked his death in another state." By 2016, 36-year-old Freddie Campion, who was raised in the UK, feared he had lost control of the meme, noticing that, quote, "90% of the stories people were sending me were mean-spirited."
So that gets to the other what you can do. And in fact, I'm going to put this as the main what you can do. Don't make fun of Florida for Florida Man. For two reasons. Number one, we should all want those open reporting laws. They genuinely will help make the country better if we all have open reporting like that. They also will help us identify dangerous trends before they kick off proper. I do wonder if we were saved by some degree from bath salts being a bigger deal than they were, because we literally learned about somebody eating somebody else's face when high on bath salts. This is a story that if I'm recalling correctly, and it's a mighty ballsy thing to say without looking up, I'll do it in a moment, but I believe that story came out of Florida. And it scared the hell out of all of us, and rightly so, and there was strong regulations put in place. We don't want to discourage a state, particularly one like Florida, which already has enough legal malfeasance, legislative malfeasance, to do away with a strong law. Reason number two is exactly what he's saying here. All these stories we're hearing, and we're laughing at the person involved being essentially real-life Dale Gribble. If you met Dale Gribble in real life, you'd feel bad for him because he's mentally unwell. Similarly, the people we're laughing at here most likely are mentally unwell. Even if they're just, fall down drunk. What's going on in that person's life that makes them fall down drunk and do these things? Fall down drunk on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday afternoon, trying to get his cat into a strip club. Is his life going great? No. I just did laugh about him. I think it's okay to laugh about him. But laugh about it in the spirit of accepting how low we are, and know that we are laughing at ourselves and the society we've chosen to build that has such a person in it. Laugh about it with just a bit of guilt. So you keep the energy up. You do rightly chuckle at someone who is being buffoonish, and hopefully you feel bad enough about that laughter, and you feel bad enough about the state of things that you're inspired to then do something about it, so that there is not another person put in that position. Now let's continue with the maudlin part of this video.
In 2017, Campion briefly stopped posting, telling the Washington Post that the comedy felt stale and that he began questioning the ethics of what he was doing. Quote, "How much do I want to be a party to essentially making fun of people on their worst day of their lives, even if they have done something wrong? Like, who gave the internet the right to add to someone's punishment?" And now the Twitter account is retired, and Campion hopes that other people like himself are learning to be more responsible about what they share online, but he doesn't seem to be quite so optimistic. He said that, quote, "I'd still love to see Florida Man have a happy ending." And of course, it's worth noting that a lot of Florida Man stories come directly from arrest reports and other documents containing uncontested facts produced by the police. And of course, the police might have an axe to grind or a certain perspective to promote. And then news organizations that report what the police say without checking any other sources are complicit in this. And they, of course, get in the habit of simply parroting what the police tell them, which in the context of an uncontested case of Florida Man might not be the biggest deal, but it could become an issue when things are more contested in different contexts. So remember, next time you share a crazy Florida Man story, your state's citizens are just as dumb and broken. Your laws are just less transparent.
Boom. Roasted.
Of course, it was good while it lasted. When the original Sunshine Amendment passed, the only major exceptions were for bank account numbers, social security numbers, and medical records. But Florida's leadership is actively chipping away at the Sunshine laws. Ron DeSantis is the first Florida governor to claim an executive privilege to keep certain government records secret. The Florida Constitution does not mention executive privilege of any kind, but a Florida trial judge has sided with DeSantis in applying the new privilege to shield emails related to how the governor screens judges.
If you want to know if you should have these laws in your state, look at the fact that Ron DeSantis is trying to wiggle out from under him right now. And that should tell you whether or not it's a good law to have. It's a great law to have. Transparency in government is so important. It also helps demystify the government. It makes the populace more educated. Nothing but good in that. I also want to point out what he said earlier about the danger of the media reporting what the police say when they have these open records laws. That same danger exists and is in fact worse. And I will tell you this from having lived it. In states that don't have these laws, if it is harder to get information out of the police, you will always get a story that leans more towards the favor of the police, and that's not good. It should be, the police should have to jump through hoops to prove that they weren't abusing citizens' rights. It should be a difficulty for them in their job, a necessary difficulty. And any time, I think a lot of times when people imagine the media failing at their job, what they're imagining is somebody being like, maybe I won't write this story, Mr. Mayor, if you give me $100. Ha, nice. I'm eating the ramen with chunks of real meat in it tonight. Have a good day. I'm not writing nothing. No. Aside from that, the person being quite poor, that was the only accurate thing about that. What it's really like is this. You write Mr. Mayor to try to get a piece of information. They tell you, you can't have it. Here's why. You say, Jesus Christ. Okay, you go back, you look at the time. You've got 5 hours to put your story together. Okay, well, he lied to me. He doesn't have that ability to deny the information. You copy the statute that says you have the right to the information. You resubmit your FOIA request. They wait an hour to get back to you. They get back to you and they partially fulfill it. You email them again because this is something they don't want to talk about. Generally, it's like when you're talking to your doctor. You're not there because things are going great, generally speaking. You're there because they got to deal with something. Well, the newsman's there because they got to deal with something. They write back and say, or as the newsman, you write back and you say, you didn't give me all the information. They write you back and say, we gave you all you're required to. We're required to. Go back, you look up the statute. Nope. Here's the clause that says you have to give me yada, yada, yada. And by the time you get all the information, it's 45 minutes before you'd have to put the whole story together and edit it and do the voiceover, all of that. And you're looking at that and staying probably late tonight versus how big the story is going to be anyway versus the story you already had saved up and ready to go that you could just play because it's your backup story that you did in case you didn't get this one done in time. Where the corruption happens is right in that moment. Whether or not the news person then has the strength to say, no, I worked hard for this story. I think this story is important. I think my audience has a right to know about it. I'm going to put this story out. God damn it. Right. Furiously quick. Record the things fast as you can. Dang it, you said the wrong person in the story. You re-record. Okay, you edit. 5 minutes. Oh, Jesus. What time am I on in the actual show? Okay, I'm on in the B block. That means I have another 10 minutes to export this. Export error. Dang it. Go back in. Restart computer. Wait. Look at the clock. Export. Done. Get it to production. Nick of time it gets in. If you're in a state like Florida, where the laws are crystal clear, and it's going to tire the mayor out and the mayor's office more to fight it, or the police chief more to fight it than it is you, the reporter. Suddenly, that looking at the clock and feeling tired at the end of the day, suddenly that's on the people who would be tempted to cover something up, rather than the people who are trying to motivate themselves to uncover corruption. Get those laws in your state.
DeSantis has already signed several bills limiting access to information about police and police methods. And in 2023, the Florida legislature has already introduced over 60 bills that would create exceptions to Florida's Public Records Acts. One of the new exceptions would prohibit the agency which provides security for DeSantis from disclosing any details about his travel arrangements, even for trips that are already covered. And another would allow courts to seal eviction proceedings upon request of landlords or tenants. And in 2022, DeSantis signed a law creating an exception for information about candidates for college and university presidencies. So Florida's exceptional sunshine law may be as endangered as, I don't know, some sort of animal that's endangered in Florida, the hawksbill sea turtle or something like that. Of course, the information that Florida has made public will live online forever, but unlike all of the Florida people, you can get your online personal data taken down with today's sponsor, in
Oh my God.
Now, I don't know about you, but I've seen...
He snuck it in there. Kudos. Ooh, he's smooth. One day, your old pal Jake will get there. All right, so what can you do? Number one, don't judge Florida for Florida man stories. Judge away for DeSantis nonsense, absolutely. But don't judge Florida for Florida man stories. Remember, we only know about them because that state has good public reporting laws. Second, tell your state representatives that you want open record laws as strong as Florida's Sunshine Act. There's a link in the description. You can contact your representatives. It's that same link we use frequently, commoncause.org. What that does is let you know everyone who represents you, just in case you haven't used it before. It's great to save as a bookmark because it tells you everyone who represents you, from the little bitty state level all the way to the national level. And it provides you with a way to get in touch with them. Use the link, find your state representatives, people who represent you within your state, and tell them that you want open records laws as strong as Florida's Sunshine Act. Let's hope Florida keeps its own Sunshine Act intact because it's great. That's a fact.